Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Alan Hathaway. I'm glad you joined me for this particular message. I'm going to be sharing with you from Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15. I want to talk to you about the concept of headstrong and senseless. One of the interesting things about the translation of Hebrew into English is that there are a number of words that can be translated from the Hebrew into the English with the word fool. And they have slightly different meanings. But in verse 15, the word for, in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15, the word for fool is hivil or evil, and it is a word which is interesting. It's kind of a broad word in the Hebrew language, and it covers actually all of the concepts that are carried by the words for fool. Generally, it reflects a person who is headstrong and arrogant and pushes forward with their own direction and their own purpose in life. They are senseless about what they do because of that headstrong behavior. And I don't know about you, but there have been a few times in my life when I've been headstrong and foolish in the things that I did. And it's important for us to understand what the writer of Proverbs is talking about when he is talking about this concept of foolishness or being a fool. We don't really think a lot about how that impacts our lives and how it impacts us personally when we do foolish things. This word is used for the word folly. It's used for the word foolish. It is a word which kind of covers over a lot of things. When we think about the word fool or foolish in the English language, we often think of the concept of stupid. And while that is contained within this word in Hebrew, the word actually reflects more on moral character than it does on intelligence or our ability to use our intelligence. It reflects more with the concept of the idea of not having a moral compass in life. And that is probably more to the point. We get our idea of fool or foolishness more from the Greek word that was used to translate this, and it was a word which reflected this idea of lack of understanding or a lack of comprehension. And that's really what the Greek word that was used to translate this when the Hebrew scholars translated it about 200 years before Christ, when they translated this particular verse, they used that particular Greek word, one which means to lack understanding or perception or direction. And as a result, we tend to look at this word foolish from that perspective. One of the areas where the Greek word crossed with the Hebrew word, and probably the reason why the Hebrew translators, or the translators who translated into Greek from the Hebrew at that time, used that particular word, is that both of them had a reflection of the concept of being headstrong and senseless in that headstrong attitude. And that probably is what we need to think about as we plunge into this idea of being a fool. In Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15, it says, "The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice." That concept is that we make our own decisions and think we're always right. We call that arrogance, and it is a very serious flaw of character is when a person believes they're always right about everything. They are, in their own eyes, lifted up, and they are conscious of their superiority, and it's a dangerous place to be. It is an idea that I don't need anybody else's opinion. I know everything already. He goes on to say, a wise man listens to advice. In the Hebrew, there are actually 5 words that can be translated with the word fool. One word means to be open or vulnerable, and it's often translated as a simpleton or a simple person, a person who is naive about life and about circumstances, and they kind of drift along through life with their head in the clouds. The next one is the word that we find in this verse, and it means a headstrong person, and it is the broadest term that seems to cover all of them. The next word, which is a word which means a person who follows their sensual desires, and they are continually acting out of the moment, out of whatever they feel or think or experience in the moment or want to experience in the moment. They are sensually driven. The next word that is used is a word for scornfulness, a person who is scornful of everything. They look down on everything and think that they are above everything. So there is a scornfulness that is often translated as a fool. And then the one we actually find a man named that, or given the nickname that, we don't know which, but his name is Nabal, and he gets that nickname because they call him the fool. And it is a person who is arrogant and who becomes a law unto themselves. It's often used in the Old Testament to reflect on the behavior of people who are criminal in their actions. And so it is the idea of being arrogant and without any sense of law and order about yourself. And that really is what this concept of fool reaches to in the Old Testament. When we look at the word headstrong, it means to not easily be restrained in behavior, to lack self-discipline, as it were, to be driven forward by our own desires and nature. And that's really what, when we talk about foolishness, that really is at the heart of being foolish. It is interesting that Solomon wrote about this in probably his middle age period. We know that part of these Proverbs were written for his son, but we also know that Solomon in his later age got into his own foolish problems. And in Ecclesiastes, we meet this elderly Solomon who has gotten wrapped up in foolishness in his life. And you can read about that in Scripture, about what caused that foolish behavior in his life. He was one of the wisest men in the ancient world, and yet he got entrapped in foolishness in his life. And he writes, I think, probably an autobiographical statement in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, beginning with verse 13. Better was a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king, who no longer knew how to take advice. For he went from prison to the throne, though in his own kingdom he had been born poor. I think he's reflecting on the man Joseph in the Old Testament, but I think he is also looking at himself and realizing that he was born at the highest stations of Jewish and Israelite society. He had been given all the opportunities. He was brilliant as an intellect. He was skilled as a thinker. He was a wise man that had a lot of understanding of politics and social interaction and all of that. But because of being led by his own desires, he did things that were foolish and ultimately led to destruction in his life. He would write later in Proverbs chapter, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, he would talk about also that concept of foolishness as being a fly in the ointment that has somehow worked its way in the ointment and as it putrefies, causes the ointment to begin to smell and have a terrible odor. And he says that's what happens when we allow foolishness to drive our lives. So when we become headstrong and senseless, we destroy ourselves. And that really is the heart of what is being gotten at by Solomon in Proverbs. Being headstrong and senseless destroys us. It leads us down a road of failure and despair. And that is not any place any of us want to go. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Hope to see you in church. Take care.